Okay. Hi everyone. Um, we're going to start. Um, welcome everyone to the September edition of the Open edX Meetup. My name is Esteban Echeverri. I'm co-founder of Olasnio, and I'm a member of the Open edX Marketing Working Group. Today we will have a 90 minutes event with 2 presentations and some unstructured social time at the end. The first presentation will be Learn how to use advanced assessment within the Open edX platform by John Swope, founder of Curriculum. That will take the first half an hour. Then we will have Ed Sarekor with his presentation regarding the updates on the Open edX ecosystem and then the new nonprofit, the Center for Reimagining Learning, also known as tCRIL. And after these 2 presentations, we will have the unstructured social time in the main room of the gather space. Please remember that the sessions will be recorded, so turn off your cameras if you consider it necessary so that you don't appear in the recording. And I'd also like to explain that there will be a Q&A session after each presentation. So please write your questions in the room chat in this gather space, and they will be read and answered after each presenter finishes his presentation. So now let me introduce John Swope, who's gonna give the initial presentation, the first presentation. Sorry, okay, there we go. So the presentation is going to be about learn how to use advanced assessment within the Open edX platform and engage in fun JavaScript exercises that can help build flexible exercises for your learners. Curriculum has been an Open edX marketplace provider since 2013. They specialize in custom installations and support their clients' online programs in education, government, and industry. Curriculum delivers a deep knowledge of the Open edX infrastructure and course development to Open edX customers interested in creating e-learning content. Without further ado, John, please go ahead.
Thanks, Esteban. I could not have asked for a better introduction between you and the trolls who are here. Hopefully we can get some of them kicked at some point, but yes. All right, let me share my screen and we'll get into it. All right, can someone confirm if you can see my screen? I can't see any thumbs up or anything.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a presentation for the non-technical or the semi-technical around advanced assessment in Open edX. And because we have 20 minutes, we'll talk specifically about JavaScript just for the sake of time. So edX has this world of tools available to course developers. It is one of the most robust and full-featured learning management softwares out there in my experience, but it can sometimes seem like those tools are only accessible to the few who either know those languages or who can kind of slog through some of the technical documentation around them. And so the purpose of this presentation for the folks that are here, or the folks who find this in recording later, if we can get a few folks who are building courses in edX.org or in Open edX that want to leverage these tools, we can make those tools accessible to them. That's the goal of this presentation. So who am I? As introduced, name is John Swope. That is not my dog. The point is, wow. The point is kind of this I've been working with Open edX for over 10 years. I did my first install of Open edX before there were named releases, so before Aspen. And I'm not a formally trained developer or sysadmin, but over the last decade of working with Open edX, I've seen a lot of pieces where you can, I've seen both kind of the back end and the front end of Open edX and how it's changed and developed over the last 10 years. In addition, I'm a learning designer. I've helped build I think hundreds of courses at this point across all different types. And what I like to do is I like to leverage as much as edX is capable of to build effective courses. So kind of this combination of bringing the technology that edX brings to bear to this world of MOOCs and open online courses is what I'm passionate about. I'm the founder of Curriculum, and over the last 10 years, we have the privilege of working with some excellent clients from the academic world, like Boston University, University of Alaska, St. George's, to the government sector, like New York City, and the private industry as well, fresh direct and microfacturing. We have some courses out now that you can check out on edX.org that are open enrollment. University of Alaska has 2 courses out right now. One is Renewable Energy for Arctic Food and Water. Another is a very interesting course called Foundations of Microgrids. BU is offering their postdoc academy on edX.org, and Northwestern currently is offering STEM teaching project. So if you want to check out some of the courses we've had a hand in, there are a few that are active and open right now. So edX offers several advanced components: Python, JavaScript, SCORM, LTI. We're going to focus on JavaScript. And we're going to take a look at what is it, what are scenarios in which I might use it, how does it work, and if I don't know how to code or don't know JavaScript, how can I still leverage it? So let's. Oh, that's right. Here's some memes that I built. So this is the first version of JavaScript. You say I want to add JavaScript assessment that gives you these spinning blocks. You say, oh, that's very cool. There's these, I can make spinning things. But then as soon as you try to edit it, you get the red text. Yeah, promise of advanced components and also the potential chaos that comes with it. So let's skip through this and get down to JavaScript. So JavaScript is good for simple games and simple simulations, and it brings together not just JavaScript, but you have JavaScript, Python, HTML, and CSS. And so you can build these tools like the ones that I'm showing here. So a couple of things we built. On the left, there's this kind of pedigree tool where you pair different genes, and you kind of have this offspring tree, and you can grade based on whether they get the right combinations of genes. On the right, we're working a lot with high charts, where you can use the high charts library and have students actually build and manipulate charts. And we'll look at one of these in the examples coming up. You can actually have them build and manipulate charts and grade them based on whether they've built the right chart. You can give them kind of customized feedback around that chart, so you can actually kind of work tactically with some of these charts. And then a simple game that I use for demonstration is tic-tac-toe. It's nice because it's kind of isolated game, but you can build things like this in OpenEdX and have OpenEdX grade whether you won tic-tac-toe. So it's a nice example, and that's where we'll spend most of our time with this demo, kind of breaking down what that looks like. What are the advantages of JavaScript? It's becoming kind of one of my favorite tools to use in OpenEdX. And the major advantage is that it's highly flexible. You can build a lot of things with this tool, and the integration is really, really slick. So it's hosted in OpenEdX. There's no additional cost or credentials. You don't have any other kind of site running. The data is stored in edX or OpenEdX. So again, no additional databases. You don't have to do any kind of data matching with anonymous user IDs at the end of a course. It's very easy to copy courses. Generally, if you build a JavaScript assessment and you export that course and import it somewhere else, it'll work without any other kind of manipulation required. And it's high compatibility. When you get into the world of LTI and SCORM, you sometimes get into these kind of cross-origin, cross-domain issues. Browsers seem to always be changing their cookie issues. Things won't work, for example, in incognito browsers and some kind of I think more highly secure browsers, and grading is built in. But for most, it's a really flexible tool that works really well with edX because it's built in, obviously. Excuse me. So this is the important slide. So when you think about how does this work, so our logic takes this round trip, and this is my diagram of how that round trip works. So when you add the JavaScript assessment component in Studio, you get something that looks like this. It says, all right, I'm expecting a grade. I'm expecting some state information potentially. We're going to focus mostly on grade for the sake of time. Yeah, we're going to focus mostly on grade. And then I want to get this information from this file. So it reaches out to this HTML file. It could be called anything you want. In this case, it's called index.html. And that file has some logic in it. You know, it might have some CSS, some HTML. It'll point to some JavaScript. And as part of that JavaScript, there is an important section in there that is generally called getGrade. And what that does is that pushes a string back to edX for the grade. So you can kind of see down here, it pushes either correct or incorrect. So let's say it pushes a correct. So it pushes that back to edX. So now we're back in edX. So this is back in the Studio component. If you look at a Studio component, you can see something that would look like this, where then edX determines if I get the answer I'm expecting, which in this case is correct, I give them credit for this question. If I get anything else, give them no credit. So that's the round trip. You start in Studio, you go off to this kind of JavaScript logic. The important part of that we're going to talk about is this kind of get grade, and that get grade sends a string back to edX, which then gets interpreted for a number grade. So let's look at this with a few examples. So this is the simplest example. This is the demo that edX now presents when you add a JavaScript component. So all it does is it will give you credit if you select correct, and it will not give you credit if you select anything else. And how that's working, if we go into Studio, we can see, so here's where we start. We want to get our grade, and we go to this file that, in this case, I've named simple.js sample. I think it's called something else when you add this the first time. So let's go and take a look at that file. Excuse me. So this is a file that's some CSS, some HTML, and has a very simple JavaScript. And here's our getGrade function. Here's the important one. And all this is doing, if you think about our round trip, it's just sending back exactly what we've selected. So whatever I select in here, all that's doing is it's just sending my choice right back to my JavaScript component. And when it arrives, I determine if the answer is correct. And if it is, I give them credit for it. And if it's not, I give them no credit for it. And so if you select correct and you submit, you get points. And obviously, if you were to say, I'm expecting a different answer, so I'm expecting the answer Apple. And even if you select correct and submit, it would no longer be right, because you're sending back this string, but it needs to, you then need to interpret that string to give the user a grade for this. So that's kind of the simple example. Now let's take a look at another example. And we'll spend a little more time kind of breaking down this round trip. So this is a tic-tac-toe game. If player X wins tic-tac-toe, they get credit. If the game is not finished or player O wins, then they don't get credit for it. But it's kind of simple tic-tac-toe game. And the way that it operates is the exact same. So we start with our JavaScript component. We go out to this file called tic-tac-toe sample. And let's break down that file. So here's the tic-tac-toe sample. So when you build these assessments, there's a few components that you need to have. And I try to break them down in this file here. So the first thing, you need some CSS and HTML. And all that does is that kind of generates this grid that's right here in this case. So some CSS, some HTML. And then you need to call this JS channel file. And in this case, I'm calling it from files.edX.org. If you wanted to move this to your own environment and call it from your own environment, you can do that as well. And then you have the JavaScript. And by the way, oftentimes when you see these examples, your HTML file will reach out to a separate CSS file and a separate JavaScript file. So you actually have 3 files. For the sake of this demo, it's easy enough to just put all of it into one single file. So all my CSS and HTML and JavaScript is all here. Makes it easy kind of to break down. So my JavaScript logic contains a few things. It contains some required logic, some custom logic, which is the game logic, the grading logic, which we've seen a couple times, and then some logic around state. So as far as required logic, this is just some required bits of code that we need to have seemingly in every JavaScript component. And for those, I mean, the point of this is to make this clear for folks who maybe are not technical. And so for folks who are not technical, you don't actually need to know what this stuff does. I don't know exactly what this does. It's something about if there's an iframe, it's part of another window, we need to be able to communicate between those windows. You don't need to know exactly what it does, except to know that it is required. You just have to have this logic in here. That's all. Then you have your custom logic. And again, if you don't know JavaScript, you don't have to know what all this does. This is just the game logic. So this is what dictates whether or not, what happens when you click on things and how you determine if someone wins. And you can kind of read through, you can kind of semi-understand what some of these things are trying to do. Like this is the combination of cells that make up a winning combination. This is checking if a round has been won. This is what happens when you click on a cell. It shows an X or shows an O and kind of rotates between those two. This is the functionality for restarting the game. You can see a little bit of kind of state information there. But this is just the game logic. And if you are a non-technical person building this, you did someone else build this for you. So you don't need to know how to read all this. What you do need to know is this. This is we're back at get grade. So what this is doing, this is determining what we're sending back to edX. And it should look very familiar at this point. It's just checking, has a round been won? And has it been won by player X? And if it is, then we send back our very familiar at this point correct string. And if it's not, then we send back incorrect. And we'll go back in edX and look at that. Then there's some state logic. We'll skip that. So we're sending back correct or incorrect. And when it arrives back here, this is a piece that's a little bit obscure. So where are we? Get grade. Yeah. So this function returns correct or incorrect. When it arrives back in edX, it ends up right here. And this kind of says that, but it ends up right here in answer. So get grade kind of becomes answer. It's a little bit, there's kind of a little bit of obscurity there, but that's what happens. And so we check if the answer is correct, then we return the 1. And if it's not, if it's anything else, we return 0. And so it's the same round trip. It's the same logic. We end up with one string that determines whether or not we get credit for this or not, even though it's a more kind of complex game example here. So we can do a little bit more than this. These are kind of trying to keep things as simple as possible. We can add a message here. So now if I win, I will get a congratulations. You have won message. And the way that we do that, we just add a little bit here. So it still should look very familiar. We still get our answer. We put this kind of default message that assumes that someone lost. But if we get our correct string, which we want to get for credit, then we change that to congratulations, you've won, and we return that message. And the syntax for how we give full credit looks a little bit different, but it's still doing the same thing. We're just returning a message along with our grade now. So let's look at a third example. And now we're doing some really interesting things. It's the same structure. It's the same bones. If someone is building this and they don't necessarily understand high charts, it doesn't matter. As long as you understand that I need to get a grade back, then that's what's important here. But you can do some really interesting things. Like this is a problem where we're asking students to fit electricity usage underneath this renewable source. There's a period of time during the day when there's energy from renewables, and so we want to turn on different kind of electric loads during those times. And so if they do it all correct, they get this kind of nice work message and they get credit for it. But if they do a couple things incorrect, let's say we turn on some loads in different areas, they'll actually get, it won't just be incorrect, but they'll also get custom messaging that says, which parts of these they need to fix. So ATV is going to be charged between 11 and 2. So, okay, let's fix that one. So I'm charging them between 11 and 2. Let's see how we do. Nope, it says try to fit all your loads under the excess supply curve. So let's turn these off. And then we're back to having done this correctly. So if we look at this one, and we're gonna look at it quickly. We're not gonna break it down fully. It's all the same. We still start with a very familiar starting point. We go to this file called distributed loads. That file, it's longer, it's more complicated, but there's still get grade function. And all this function is doing is it's checking for all the reasons why this might be incorrect, adding some messages. That's where we get this kind of custom messaging. But at the very end, it's going to look very familiar. If there are no messages, that means they've done it all correctly. So we're going to return correct. And in edX, if I get correct, then I give that success message, which is that green, nice work. Then I give that success message and give them credit for that. For getting for doing the problem right. They get full credit for it. So we're expanding what we're doing with JavaScript, but the loop remains the same, and what you need to understand remains the same as well. So let's go back to our presentation. So how can anyone, hopefully, leverage these advanced assessments? So the important thing is to learn the edX side of things. So we just went through here, learning kind of that loop, learning what edX expects to get back, learn the edX side of things, understand what edX needs in order to get the information from these tools. Secondly, use templates. If you take on a developer, they're not specifically an edX or OpenEdX developer, you just take on someone who understands JavaScript. They're not going to understand all the different idiosyncrasies of edX and how it works, and these kind of little required JavaScript and what it does when it gets this string back. They're going to appreciate being able to start from something. So use templates. So the course that I'm showing here, it's available on GitHub. Excuse me. And there's a link, I think, in the next slide. I'm sure these slides will be shared. But feel free to use this course as a template and share it with any kind of developers you might be working with on these things. And lastly, maybe this should have been the first thing, but contract out. So don't waste time doing something that's going to take you 5 or 10 times longer than someone else. Focus on what you know and hire out the rest to someone that's going to do it better and faster and cheaper, most likely. So this is just kind of a list, I think, of what you need to understand. So with JavaScript, understanding grade function, which we talked about today, and then state is kind of the next level of that. Setting state and then applying state. And then this is the link to the course that we use in this demo. So some tips on contracting out if you do want to leverage these tools and you don't have the skills necessarily to build a tic-tac-toe game. I use Upwork.com for kind of little one-off projects like these. I've had a lot of success with it. When there are a lot of sites out there like Upwork. I was not the only one, but it just happens to be the one that I use. When you do look for work on these kind of sites, you want to outline your problem very, very clearly, put as much detail as you can, and then you have the chance to ask questions in kind of the application basically, and you want to ask critical thinking questions. You don't just want to ask how many years have you been a JavaScript developer and can you do this? You want to ask critical thinking questions to determine if the person that's responding has looked at your requirements, they understand your requirements, and they can communicate their thoughts about your requirements. You'll get a sense of how they kind of communicate by asking these kind of critical thinking questions.
Hi, John. Sorry to interrupt. We are
Okay.
running out of time, right? So we have
last slide.
Five more minutes. So you could wrap up in 2 minutes, maybe.
Oh yeah, we'll be done in about 45 seconds. Right. Thank you. Fourth is be ready with the right access. Once you take someone on, the first thing you need to do is get them access to what they're going to be working on. You don't want to make that choppy. You don't want to be put into a position where you have to give them too much access. So be ready with, when you hire someone, be ready to give them the right access to do what they need to do. Second to last, I really like to start with these small kind of 1 to 2 day projects. I don't want to take someone on and give them the expectation that, hey, we're going to be working on this for the next, month or 2 months or so. And then if I don't like working with them, have to kind of unceremoniously fire them. I like to start with these kind of small 1 to 2 day projects. That way you get a sense of how it is working with someone. And if it goes well, you can hire them for more projects and kind of extend that time. And if it doesn't go well, they've completed that, small project, and no harm, no foul. And you can kind of say, we'll let you know if there's more, essentially. And along those lines, I really like to hire multiple people if you're able to. Hire 2 people, 3 people, because you'll get a real sense early on of what it's like working with these people, how well they communicate, how well they understand your problem. And you'll see kind of very stark differences in folks' skill level and their communication ability. So you hire multiple people, and then you stick with the one that you work best with. That kind of helps avoid situations where you're stuck with one person and don't necessarily know what else is out there. So as promised, that's the end. And so I'll say thank you for listening, and I'll open up for any questions. And thanks for getting rid of the trolls, whoever did that.
Yes. Thank you, Eden, for that. So thank you, John, for your presentation. There's one question here in the chat. Sure. Is there any showcase of JavaScript tools already in use in OpenEdX, similar to the OpenEdX extensions directory?
I wish there was one. I'm not aware of one. Is anyone else aware of one? Because I'd like to see it for JavaScript samples. I'd love to see it for Python applications as well. I've heard something about MIT having this library of Python problems that they've used for these math courses in edX, but I haven't had a chance to work with it, so I'm not aware of one. I wish there was.
Okay, great. So that's all. Thank you very much for your presentations, and well, feel free to contact John after the second talk in the unstructured area. He will be available there.
Okay. Thanks, Esteban.
Great. So now let me introduce Ed Sarekor. He will be providing a presentation about the updates on the OpenEdX ecosystem. So I think, Ed, you don't need more presentation, so please go ahead.
Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me? Esteban, you can hear me? Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, John, for a really, really interesting presentation about advanced problem types on the platform. That was some of those problem types were really, really exciting to see, and thanks for presenting it. Thank you for enduring the trolls, and apologies to everyone for having to experience that. I suppose the OpenEdX meetup can be said to have actually made it if we were attracting trolls at this point, but hopefully, and thank you to Eden for managing them out of the room, but we'll take steps to make sure that that's not a problem in the future. But thank you for your patience. All right, so this presentation is going to be it's actually going to dovetail quite nicely with John's in a way, because he's talking about capabilities on the Open edX platform, and he's talking about building courses on edX.org. And we frequently find that there's a lot of confusion between what is edX and edX.org, what is Open edX, and now the new entry into the confusion, tCRIL, the organization for which I work, the Center for Reimagining Learning. So some of this presentation will be old hat to many of you, but I think the context is useful to kind of unpack all of the details and hopefully answer some questions that we get quite frequently. The questions I'm going to try to answer today is to sort of clearly differentiate between edX, now a subsidiary of 2U, and the Open edX platform, to explain what tCRIL, the Center for Reimagining Learning, is and does, and a little bit of detail about how the Open edX project is being run today. In order to set some base context, we'll go back to the beginning. edX, the nonprofit, was founded in 2012 by Harvard and MIT. And I think everybody knows this detail, but with the mission of allowing access to high quality educational content to everyone, everywhere. And this is actually a snapshot of pretty close to the original homepage of edX.org, for those of you who were around in 2012 and remember it. I think at that point we had exactly 6 courses. One of them was a nonce course, the first one on the platform. I'm not sure if we were actually able to issue certificates at this point, but that followed pretty closely after actually having live courses. So just to sort of one simple clarification, edX is a company, originally a nonprofit company. It is a destination site where universities and corporations and NGOs host their courses. And that organization is the organization that created a piece of software, the Open edX platform, which is something that is used all over the world, not just at edX.org. So originally, these are our nice new shiny logos. As you remember, back in 2012, it looked more like this. But you get the idea. All right, so let's step through a couple of the crucial differences, and some of this will be repetitive, but I think it bears understanding clearly, and we do get quite a few questions about it. So again, edX is the company, originally a nonprofit founded by Harvard and MIT. It's the learning destination site. It is the organization that originally created the Open edX software platform. And edX is now a subsidiary of 2U. At least the name has been acquired by 2U, and we'll get to that in a minute. And they are users of the Open edX platform, and we still believe probably the largest single Open edX site in the world, although there have been some sites in China that have been getting pretty close. And on the other side, Open edX is it's a service-oriented software platform. edX is deployed, but it's also deployed by many of the people in this room. It's deployed at MIT, it's deployed at FunMOOC in France, at Progetto Now in Portugal, Campus.il in Israel, in many other places around the world. So it is a piece of software, open source software under the HAPL license that anyone with operational skills can run on their own, or can use via the hosting services provided by many of our partners in the Open edX ecosystem. So if you want to use Open edX and don't have the capabilities of hosting it yourself, we have a solution for that as well. So again, it's also an open source project, and everything that comes along with that, making sure that the software is available, that we're making sure that people have the right to contribute the code that they contribute, making sure that the software is safe to use and updated and maintained. And Open edX is also the community around the software. So everybody in this room and many more thousand people around the world who are focused on building and using and improving the Open edX platform. And then I want to go through a couple things that have happened more recently. So in November of 2021, about a year ago, 2U Incorporated purchased substantially all the assets of edX Incorporated, which was a nonprofit at that time. And one of the complications of this deal is that they purchased the edX name. We'll get to why that matters in a second. But they did not purchase the Open edX software platform. That software stayed with the original nonprofit that was that built and stewarded the open source project, but now was in an interesting situation of having sold its name. So tCRIL was the name that was chosen for the nonprofit after the sale. So again, 2U purchased substantially all of the assets, including things like partner relationships and the destination site and the trademark and name edX. But the software platform remained with a nonprofit that has a new name, the Center for Reimagining Learning, tCRIL. One quick detail I want to go over is tCRIL is intended to be a temporary name for the nonprofit. So we may have one additional confusion that I'm going to have to explain and ask you guys to help sort of communicate to the rest of the community about, but also kind of endure, I suppose. We expect that in the near future that tCRIL will have a permanent name, but I have a little diagram to help kind of walk us through what this looks like. So originally, the name edX was the name of the nonprofit that created and stewarded the Open edX project. Today, that organization is tCRIL. It's really the same organization with a different name. And tomorrow, it will be the same organization with yet a different name and a name that we don't yet know. So if that's not, hopefully this helps explain some of the confusions around it. It's a suboptimal situation, but it is where we are today. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff I've already spoken to, and I'm not going to read this wall of text. But tCRIL is an organization that will focus a lot of its energy on the Open edX project. We have a team of 12 people who are dedicated, 100% of their capacity is focused on the open source project, stewarding it, building the community, making sure that all the things that need to get done for the project happen. The organization as a whole will also invest in other things around equity in education, specifically improving education online and in classrooms, and focused on groups that have historically been excluded from or disadvantaged in terms of opportunities related to education. Where tCRIL will invest is still a work in progress. But the Open edX work, as you know, is active and ongoing, and we don't expect there to be any kind of changes to the energy or level of investment around the Open edX project. Yeah, some of these details I've already covered, but we see as tCRIL, we see ourselves as kind of the facilitators and coordinators and members of this broad Open edX community, of which you are also members. Our job is to make sure that there are some basic services available that every open source project needs to provide capacity and leadership. But at the end of the day, for any open source project to be successful, the entire community needs to be involved, to have a stake, to have influence, and the ability to lead in various areas around the project. And we're committed to making that a reality. One detail that's changed that I think everyone is aware of, but the project now has a governance body called the Technical Oversight Committee. It was created at the time of the sale of the edX name and assets to 2U. That is a group of 9 people made up of representatives from tCRIL, to you and the community that is responsible for kind of the overall technical governance of the project. As you probably know, we're in the midst of preparing for the elections of the community members to the TOC. This is a very exciting development. This is the first time we're going to have community elections. The first 3 community members, Xavier Antovia, Catherine Mochenet, and Ignacio Desmahol, were chosen because we didn't have an electoral structure in place. And that group came together and proposed how we are going to elect community members going forward. And that process is ongoing now. So please register to vote, nominate people to run for office, and follow up if you have any questions about how to do any of those things. Yep. Love it when I find a spelling mistake in the middle of the conference. Again, so this is a community-led project. We've been focused on growing the importance and influence of working groups across the community, whether it's the data working group, translation working group, product working group. This is where the real work of the project is happening. And a lot of you are already participating in those spaces, but we encourage everyone to. That is like where the decisions are made and is going to be where the work is happening. The TOC isn't going to be day-to-day in the project. They're going to be providing a high-level framework for the project, but the work will be done by all of us. And there were 2 other key things that people probably already know about but are important. The maintainers program, which we are currently piloting, which was described in OEP 55, and the core contributor program, which was defined in OEP 54, an opportunity for people to have the rights to commit directly to repositories in the Open edX project by demonstrating their kind of commitments and capabilities and in getting responsibilities and rights in return. Okay, so returning to some of the perennial questions that we hear and some of the ones that I introduced at the beginning of the talk, I tried to outline the differences between what edX is and what Open edX is. I put a green check mark here on my self-assessment, but you'll tell me in Q&A whether I've done it right or whether there are additional questions that you have, and I'm happy to try to answer them. Try to answer at a very high level what tCRIL is, what tCRIL does, and a little bit of detail about how the project is being run today. Some other questions we get frequently are, can I host my courses on the Open edX platform? And the answer to that is a resounding yes, you can. And you can run the platform yourself if you have the operational capabilities to do that. Many people do. You can use tools like Tutor to run the Open edX platform in a way that's a little bit simpler. But you can also work with hosting providers that you can find on the openedx.org site to provide a SaaS offering or hosting a custom platform for you. So you can definitely host your courses on the Open edX platform. We also get the question, can I host my courses on edX.org? And I don't work for edX.org, but I have a little bit of summary information that was provided by folks who do, and Ned Batchelder's here, and he can kind of also extend upon this in Q&A. But the answer to that question is maybe. edX.org hosts courses from kind of top universities and corporations around the world. It usually hosts courses based on a long-term relationship with an organization and a commitment to creating a lot of courses. It is not kind of a YouTube for courses where anyone can come in and host a course on that site. So it is possible that organizations that are in the room today can host their courses on edX.org, but the Open edX team at tCRIL doesn't make this decision, and it's going to depend on what organization you represent, whether edX.org is going to be the right place for you to host your courses. If edX.org is not the right place, again, the Open edX platform is still available to you, and it's available at quite low friction if you use one of our hosting providers. And then finally, does edX, the subsidiary of 2U, still use the Open edX platform? And the answer to that is yes. There's all of edX.org as part of 2U is using the Open edX platform as it did before. And there's quite a lot of conversation about extending the usage of the platform at edX.org. There's a lot of energy and a lot of commitment on 2U's part, and Ed can speak to that as well in Q&A. But that is definitely also a resounding yes. 2U is excited about, and still, as far as we know, the largest Open edX site in the world. And that's what I have. So we can go immediately to Q&A.
Great. Thank you very much, Ed, for the presentations. Now let's pick some questions from the chat. Okay, we have one initial question. How many technicians are really needed for an organization to customize Open edX for their own?
Yeah, so I can't answer that with an exact number. So it's going to depend on a lot of things. First, there are two parts. You will need to have some support for hosting the platform. So people who do normal operational things like making sure that your database is backed up and that you're not running out of disk space and that your services are running. And you're going to need, if you want to customize the site, you might, if you mean just sort of the look and feel of the site, that's one thing. But if you're talking about creating really interesting new advanced problem types like John demoed earlier, those are special capabilities that you would need to have access to either from contractors or staff. So edX.org, have a 24/7, 365, SLA for their site and a lot of infrastructure to make sure that it ran smoothly. So they have a pretty substantially sized DevOps team, but some other organizations run much leaner.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so we have another question. So there's still a lot of confusion between edX.org and the Open edX platform. What would you recommend to Open edX service providers to make clear the difference between edX and Open edX? To request, do you think we can publish a short explanation on a fixed and good visible position of the website?
Yeah, I think we can. If you're talking about taking some of the content in this presentation and moving it over to the openedx.org website, definitely. If you feel like the presentation is useful, I'm happy to share. You can take content from it liberally and use it as you choose. If you feel like the presentation fell short in answering the questions of your customers, then that feedback would be useful for me, and I'd be happy to try to improve the presentation to better meet the need.
Great, thank you. One other question. Is there any insight into what other than the Open edX platform will be in tCRIL's portfolio?
Sorry, what was the...
From Juan, a question from Juan.
And so what other than that will be in tCRIL's portfolio? So at this point, the folks who are working on additional programs are having conversations with a bunch of other organizations to figure out kind of where we want to invest there. So it's really too early to say specifically, other than I was going to say, other than we are committed to projects that expand the equity of access to educational resources, but also projects that have a demonstrated efficacy. So we have a commitment, a strong belief that access is important, but it's only the beginning. It's not enough in and of itself. So I don't think I can say today where the specific areas of investment will be. And I do anticipate that for the non-Open edX side of tCRIL, that this year will be mostly around learning and preliminary partnerships, not a lot of heavy investment.
Great, thank you. One other question. What kinds of discussions do you expect the Technical Oversight Committee to be having?
Yeah. So let's see, I could talk about some of the things that the Technical Oversight Committee has been doing so far. This year has been focused on kind of what I like startup activities for that group. And some of the critical things that needed to happen were things like developing the election process. So it hasn't been focused, so not all of the focus has been on kind of the technical direction or even the product direction of the project. Another area where the Technical Oversight Committee has been focused is on starting to think about overall product strategy for the platform. And this spring we had kind of an offsite dedicated to that, where everybody brought their expertise from the education and educational technology sphere to talk about where we saw opportunities to really innovate and improve education online. And I think we came out of that with a commitment to a product management philosophy that is based on customer input, market research, and sort of product management discipline. So I think a lot of you have seen the work that Jenna Makowski has been doing on our side and around also the product management working group, trying to doing like I think something like 30 customer interviews at this point, gathering quite a lot of information from the market, building kind of a core value proposition statement for the platform. So I think that was another key area where the Technical Oversight Committee asked a working group to do a lot of research and come back with recommendations about where we should invest.
Great, thank you. One other question. Is there any progress of Open edX with X API?
Yes. Let's see, who's that question from?
From Akar.
Okay. Yeah, so XAPI can mean a lot of things. So it is one of the areas of focus for the data working group. So if you are specifically interested in XAPI statements for learning traces or learning analytics that are emitted when learners interact with the platform, I would strongly encourage you to join the data working group, because we are focusing quite a bit on it there. There is an existing XAPI capability through the event routing backends on Open edX platform, but we are focusing on a couple things. One is getting conformance to the ADL video profile for XAPI events related to video, and also looking at developing a profile for Open edX learning events that is going to be, we've just kicked off the work and created an ADL net working group for that piece of work.
Great, thank you. So I think we have one more question because we are running out of time. So here's a question from Ekaterina Keleva. Is there a sophisticated way to migrate content courses between installations? Means if one day edX.com persuades me to have my courses on edX, can we do it really easy?
If your course is an Open edX course, then yes. We have the OLX format, which can be used for importing and exporting and importing courses from one Open edX instance to another. If your course is in a different technology, the answer might also still be yes, because, for example, there's the CC to OLX converter, which will take a subset of common cartridge structures and convert them to OLX. So you could export a course from, say, Moodle and run CC to OLX and then import it into Open edX. There's probably some follow-up work you'd need to do to migrate everything over, but yeah, Open edX to edX, yes, because one more time, Open edX is the software. It's the same. It is the software that edX.org uses. It's also the software that MIT uses and the software that campus.il uses. And I know that in the case of campus and I believe MIT as well, there are cases where the same course is being run on campus as in the MOOC platform, and the mobility between the places is relatively straightforward.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Ed, for your presentation and the Q&A session. And I think with this we can finish this first part of the meetup. And then I encourage every one of you to go to the general area and connect, introduce, and keep this community